Rex hadn't planned on becoming a galactic gardener. In fact, the last thing he remembered applying for was a consulting gig for alien soil toxicity. Definitely not manual labor on a remote, highly sensual moon. But rent was overdue. His last relationship had ended with a restraining order from a cactus-based life form, and this job paid in actual credits. He stepped off the shuttle, bag over shoulder, and was immediately hit by a wall of warm humidity and floral-scented air so thick it nearly kissed him. The estate was lush in a way that felt indecent. Petals as big as chairs, vines with what looked like suggestively puckered lips, and everywhere the sound of plant life breathing, light, delicate gasps like something from a massage parlor trying too hard. Rex blinked. Right. Gardening. Just plants. Nothing weird. He was greeted by a tall, impossibly poised woman with deep violet skin, obsidian eyes, and a dress seemingly spun from leaves and silk. Lady Virelia, the client, the widow, and, as she'd later clarify, last bloom of the house of the second blooming. Ah, she said, voice like warm tea. You must be the human. You came highly recommended, strong hands, patient touch. I do hope you'll be gentle with my beds. Rex nodded slowly. Of course. I'm very experienced. With, garden beds. He was led to the main greenhouse, which looked less like a tool shed and more like a sacred temple where orchids went to have affairs. Everything was pulsating slightly. The walls shimmered. Even the damn shovel rack moaned when he brushed past it. So, he said, gripping his datapad for stability, any particular soil pH concerns? Drainage issues? Root rot? Virelia tilted her head. Oh, I assure you, my garden is quite moist already. But it's been untended for some time. You'll need to coax it. Persuade it to open again. Rex coughed. Right. I brought nutrient packs. The job began. He tried to keep it professional. He really did. But the moment he plunged his spade into the first flower bed, the soil shuddered. A soft sigh escaped a nearby bush. A vine uncurled from the ceiling and wrapped gently around his wrist, not tightly, just there. Don't worry, Virelia said with a smile as she leaned against the railing and watched him sweat. They're simply excited. It's been ages since anyone touched them with such vigor. Rex tried not to meet her eyes. I'm just loosening the roots. So you are, she murmured. It went on like this for hours. Every rake stroke was met with plant groans. Every watering hose left the leaves glistening like a romance novel cover. He started wearing gloves to avoid unexpected caresses from carnivorous-looking lilies. One afternoon, she brought him refreshments, some glittery purple nectar and a plate of what resembled spiced figs. She watched as he drank. You must tell me, she said. Do humans always work so hard without reward? Rex blinked. Isn't the reward the satisfaction of a job well done? She laughed softly. Oh, darling. That might be the most human thing I've ever heard. He didn't know whether to be flattered or insulted. By day 3, he was exhausted and confused. Every interaction with Virelia was laced with innuendo he wasn't sure was intentional. She complimented his hose pressure. She asked if he liked working deep in the crevices. Once she casually mentioned needing help with pollinating her favorite blossom manually, before walking away with a sway that screamed, "This is definitely not about gardening." The assistant bot he'd brought kept logging clips with tags like "Sexual implication detected, training purposes?" and "Potential harassment, review later." Still, he pressed on. Because he needed the money. And maybe, just maybe, he liked seeing her smile when he pruned the bioluminescent orchids just right. Or when he waded waist-deep into the pond flowers and came out dripping, muddy, and blushing. Rex wasn't entirely dumb. He could tell something was off here. The garden wasn't just alive, it was reactive. Sensitive. Emotional. And Virelia, she lingered too long. She always said good morning, like it meant something else. But every time he thought to ask her what this really was, she'd give him that look. That tragic, regal stare, as though she was waiting for him to understand something she wasn't allowed to say. He decided he'd get to the bottom of it. Tomorrow. Maybe. Tonight, he had to mulch the pleasure ferns. Again. The next morning, Rex arrived at the main atrium ready to work, but the moment he stepped in, the entire garden gave a soft rustle, like it had been waiting for him. The vines quivered. A massive flower turned its head. He hesitated, then muttered, "Okay. So the plants have a crush. That's normal now." He started by trimming a few overgrown heartvines that wrapped around the central columns. The moment his shears touched the first stem, a low purring hum echoed through the air. The cut piece coiled tightly in his hand, warm and pulsing. He dropped it with a yelp. Varelia strolled in casually, sipping a cup of nectar. She wore something sheer enough to start a diplomatic incident. "They like you," she said with a smile. "No, truly. They react only to intent. You must have very fertile energy." "I'm literally just pruning," Rex replied, keeping his voice firm. "This is routine horticultural maintenance." She tilted her head. "Is that what you call it when you're elbow deep in my wettest moss bed?" He blinked. I was checking for root fungus." She said, sipping again. "So thorough." He retreated to the pollen chambers, hoping for less drama. No such luck. The air was thick with a golden mist, and every step sent tiny puffs into the air. A sudden burst of pollen hit him square in the face. He sneezed violently, then staggered, dizzy. Varelia appeared at the door, her expression softening. "Oh dear. You've been marked." "Marked?" he asked, voice nasal. "For what? Allergies?" She stepped closer, placing a hand on his chest. "No, my dear. Chosen. That particular species only releases its pollen when it senses a compatible mate." "Mate?" His voice cracked. "I'm not dating your petunias." "They're not petunias," she murmured. "They're the heartfruit line. Very selective. Very loyal." He stared at her. "I think your garden just proposed to me." She smiled enigmatically. "Perhaps it knows what I haven't said aloud." He escaped to the nutrient chamber, face flushed and heart pounding. It was getting harder to pretend this was just a job. The plants were affectionate. The widow was suggestive. The boundaries between professionalism and pollination were wearing thin. At midday, he attempted a simple task, rerouting the memory blossoms. The instructions said they only bloom with emotional resonance. He muttered something sarcastic about romance novels and placed his hand on the soil. The bloom exploded upward in full color. He reeled back. The petals shaped themselves into the outline of a kiss. Varelia entered just in time to see it. "Your emotions stirred it," she said softly. "They respond to longing." "I was just thinking about lunch," he lied. "No," she said, approaching. "You were thinking about me." He froze. She stood inches away now, her presence as overwhelming as the floral air. "You don't know the truth yet, do you?" He shook his head. "I'm not even sure what the job is anymore." She guided his hand to the center of the bloom. It pulsed gently under his fingers. "My people don't reproduce with physical union alone. We require resonance, soul, sensation, surrender. The garden is our body. Our womb. Our temple." Rex was quiet. "I haven't bloomed in years," she said. "Not since my husband died. The garden responds to grief, or to new possibility. You've awakened something. In it. In me." He swallowed. "Are you saying this entire garden is part of you? In every way that matters. And when you said you wanted me to tend it, I meant every word." Rex sat down heavily on a mossy bench that sighed under him. "This is above my pay grade." She knelt beside him. "I can end the contract if you wish. You've done more than enough. But if you stay, it won't be just for the flowers." He looked at her. Her expression wasn't coy anymore. It was honest. There was vulnerability behind the flirtation. "I'm not experienced with this kind of thing," he said. Emotion-linked plant courtship wasn't part of my degree. She chuckled. Neither was it in mine. It's instinct. Shared feeling. Trust. He thought about the way the vines touched him without fear. The way the garden bloomed under his hands. The way she smiled when he didn't pretend to be an expert. So, hypothetically, he said, if I were to bond with your garden, what exactly does that involve? She leaned in, breath warm. Touch. Presence. Desire. And yes, eventually, planting a seed. He blinked. That was not metaphorical, was it? She shook her head slowly. He sighed. I really should have read the fine print. But you haven't run, she said. No, he said quietly. I haven't. She offered him a piece of glowing fruit from a nearby vine. He took it. Bit into it. Sweet, electric, warm. Virelia smiled. So, she said, shall we continue your cultivation training? Rex smirked. Lead the way, my lady. And behind them, the entire garden rippled in eager anticipation. Rex returned to the garden the next cycle, but this time something had changed, not just in the atmosphere, but in him. Where he had once tiptoed around every vine, now the touch felt familiar. The soil no longer pulsed in surprise, it welcomed him. Virelia's presence felt less like a test and more like a rhythm he was learning to move with. He didn't try to hide his curiosity anymore, or the strange thrill he got when the plants responded to his touch. He began experimenting. Different tones in his voice caused the color of blossoms to shift. A gentle hum sent entire sections of moss quivering. When he thought of Virelia's laughter, a rare vine opened fully, one that hadn't bloomed in recorded history. He was learning her, through her garden. And she was letting him. During a routine watering, he noticed the soil around a spiral-root tree had hardened unnaturally. He tapped it, frowned, then dug into it with his fingers. The roots resisted, then loosened under his hands like a sigh. As he cleared the blockage, a sudden surge of floral scent burst around him. Not pleasant, desperate. Like need. He backed up, blinking. That wasn't on the map. Virelia appeared at his side, grave. You've found the conception root. Is that bad? It's dormant, she said. Because I was. He studied her. This garden, it's more than a memorial. It's a cycle, isn't it? Growth, grief, rebirth. She nodded. When my husband died, I sealed off that section. I didn't want to feel again. The garden accepted my will. But now, it senses a new season. Rex looked down at the still pulsing soil. So this is like planting a new future? In a way, she said softly. But it cannot be forced. The garden chooses. The bloom only takes root when the emotions are honest. He sat back, thoughtful. So all this time, you've been testing me? No. I've been hoping you'd feel something without being asked. He didn't answer. He just reached out and let his fingers rest on the edge of the root knot. It pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat waiting to sink. Nothing dramatic happened. No thunder, no explosion of petals. But the surrounding plants slowly turned toward him. Watching. That night, he didn't sleep in his guest quarters. He stayed in the garden, listening to the air. Every sigh of leaf and vine, every twitch of a branch. He realized they were dreaming. Feeling. And he felt protective. Not because he had to. Because he wanted to. The next morning, Virelia met him where the dawnflower pods opened. You stayed. I didn't want to miss anything. She smiled. Then it's time. For what? For the garden to show you everything. She led him to a section he'd never entered. The plants stepped aside for her. Literally moved. She turned back to him, uncharacteristically shy. This is the womb of memory, she said. Here, the garden stores its emotions. My emotions. You'll see what it chooses to share. He stepped in. Suddenly he was surrounded by light, scent, and sensation, memories that weren't his. He saw Virelia laughing with her late husband beneath glowing fruit trees. Her hands holding tiny seedlings. Her mourning alone. Her hope, slowly cracking through grief like shoots in frost. And then, him. His face. His hands. His laugh, echoed in her recollections. The garden had recorded it all. He emerged breathless. You've been feeling everything I've felt. Yes, she whispered. And I you? He looked at her, really looked. No innuendo. No teasing. Just truth. I didn't come here looking for this, he said. I was just broke and tired. She stepped closer. I didn't invite you for this either. But the garden saw you before I did. He chuckled. Well, it has good taste. Her smile deepened. Then shall we begin the final rite? Wait, there's a rite? She laughed. Of course. It's ceremonial. Symbolic. Intimate. But optional. Rex took her hand. I'm not going anywhere. Together, they approached the heart of the garden. It opened for them. The plants trembled. The earth warmed. And somewhere deep beneath the soil, the conception root pulsed steadily, once dormant, now waiting to bloom. Rex stood before the blooming chamber, the garden's energy curling around him like a humid breath. His skin prickled not from nerves, but from the feeling of being watched by 1,000 silent petals. Verelia stood opposite him, calm but charged, her gaze softer than it had ever been. The ritual didn't require words, but the silence between them throbbed with unspoken questions. This wasn't just about passion, or curiosity, or flirtation turned too far. This was about merging with something alien, sacred, and alive. She stepped forward, reaching out with both hands. Her fingers were warm, trembling slightly, but her voice stayed steady. The bond isn't just physical. It's shared memory. Shared instinct. A mutual blooming. The garden accepts only when both are willing to risk transformation. I'm not scared of changing, Rex said quietly. I just don't want to get it wrong. You can't, she replied. If your intent is honest, the garden will guide you. They moved together into the innermost circle of the chamber. The walls pulsed with light that matched their heartbeats. Around them, vines slowly curled, not to restrain but to witness. Rex let instinct lead. He placed his hand against the heartbloom's core, warm, slick, throbbing with some pulse that wasn't quite mechanical or biological. It responded instantly. The entire floor hummed, and vines gently wrapped around his wrists, not to hold him but to align him. He could feel Verelia across from him, her energy syncing with his. A ripple passed through the room. In his mind, a sudden flood of sensation, her memories, her grief, her longing, her restrained hope. Then, his own emotions echoed back, but stronger, refracted through the garden's perception. His loneliness, his humor, his desire to be more than useful, to matter. He didn't have to say anything. She already knew. Her presence moved closer, not her body but something beneath it, her essence. She let it out slowly, like scent drifting from a flower. The bond wasn't consummated by touch, but resonance. Their breaths synced. Their thoughts spiraled together. The garden around them grew louder, not in sound, but sensation. Petals opened, vines stretched, a rain of golden spores fell in slow motion. And then, it anchored. The chamber shifted, folding inward. A low harmonic hum filled the space. The heartbloom's core burst open into a shimmering cluster of fractal petals, releasing a sharp, sweet scent. The pollen clung to Rex's skin like light. His heart pounded not from fear but from awe. The garden had accepted him. He turned to Verelia, now glowing faintly, her eyes misted but smiling. That's it? He asked, breathless. She chuckled. You're now technically part of my reproductive archive. Well, I've had worse job perks. She walked closer, tilting her head. You do realize what this means? That I'm married to a greenhouse? That you're bonded? The garden will never respond to another the way it does to you. And neither will I. He absorbed that. He felt it, even before she said it. He was rooted now. Not just employed, not just fascinated. Bound. He touched a vine near him and it shivered, releasing a new bloom that shaped itself into a spiral with dual hearts. Virelia stepped beside him, her fingers brushing his. I came here for money, he said. Now I'm leaving with a legacy. You're not leaving, she replied. He laughed. Fair. But it doesn't feel like staying. It feels like arriving. They stood together as the garden began a slow, new rhythm. Where before it had mourned, now it pulsed with quiet joy. The soil had changed color. New sprouts emerged at their feet. The chamber air grew cooler, more fertile. Later, when Rex moved through the other sections, every plant leaned toward him. They didn't just accept him, they celebrated him. The garden had taken his emotional imprint and woven it into its core. The vines wrapped around his tools like playful pets. A flower unfolded with the exact scent of his homeworld coffee. It was no longer just Virelia's sanctuary. It was theirs. As days passed, Virelia took to walking beside him more often. They worked less, talked more. She taught him the hidden meanings of certain blooms. He shared old earth idioms that baffled her. One day he said, "You're the whole package." And she spent an hour poking her own hips, trying to understand what part was the wrapping. He laughed harder than he had in years. The garden laughed too, or something close to it. A wave of laughing flora burst into bloom. The entire estate shimmered. One morning, Rex noticed a tiny sprout with petals that mimicked both their fingerprints. He bent to touch it, and it pulsed gently in response. Virelia watched, a serene smile on her face. A new generation. He swallowed. So, we're parents? In the garden's way, yes. I don't even remember planting it. You didn't. The bond did. He stared at the bloom. This is the weirdest love story ever. Then it suits us perfectly. And the garden, as if in agreement, opened another 1,000 blossoms, each more vibrant than the last.